This episode is sponsored by Day by Day Book, a guided journal that helps you navigate the ups and downs of change while creating a life you love. For more information on the classic, recovery, or teen day book, go to livedaybyday.com.
Once I started to take accountability for my actions, for my mistakes, for my feelings, that for me changed everything. Because then it was like, I have the power to make a difference in my life. I don't have to rely on the individuals whom impacted me to change what they did or apologize for what they did or make me feel better. I can do it.
Welcome to Journeys Through Change, a podcast that inspires women to let go of the fear and say yes to possibility. I'm your host, Noelle Van, an author, creator, and empowerment coach who spent years in corporate America helping innovators and leaders ride the waves of change with ease and grace. I now work with women to step into change and unleash the power they have to create a life they love. Whether you're contemplating a change in your career, relationship, health, lifestyle, or anything in between, nothing's off the table. I'll be offering up simple insights to help you manage the ups and downs of change and sharing interviews with successful women who took a leap of faith to create the life they knew they were meant to live, sharing their wisdom, advice, and all the juicy lessons they learned along the way. So get cozy in your favorite comfy chair and let's get started. Having a nurturing and stable upbringing is something many of us take for granted. Growing up with a single parent in the throes of addiction can shape and mold a little girl in so many ways. Tynitria Portis grew up with an alcoholic mother who abandoned her at the age of 5, leaving her to care for her younger siblings, while struggling to find stability within the chaos of emotional, mental, physical, and sexual abuse. Over the years, she experienced challenges in relationships, and after coming into terms with her own infidelity, she credits years of therapy along with a strong will to break the patterns of generational dysfunction for helping her grow into the woman she is today. As a spiritual leader and confidence coach, she now helps others gain the confidence to channel the pain caused by past trauma into creating greater purpose in their lives. Tynitria, it is such a pleasure to have you with us today. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
So, Tynitria, I want to kind of set the stage here, and I think maybe it would be good for us to travel back in time a little bit to where you feel comfortable kind of starting to share. Tell us a little bit about your childhood.
So I'm the oldest of 4 children. I have 2 sisters and a brother. And my youngest sister, who's the baby, came in a little later. So in the beginning, it was just 3 of us. What I remember, and I have my memories as early as 2, is being with my mom, my brother's dad at the time, and kind of coming into my childhood the way any child comes into their childhood, but also being aware that there were things that was happening around us that didn't feel as normal, even though I didn't have a good idea of what normal was. And so I typically start my journey with when I hit the age of 5 years old. My mom was dating a drug dealer at the time. And on one of the occasions when she got ready to find someone to babysit us, we went to visit a family member of his. And I knew the first time that we were there, and it's so odd because I knew the first time that we went to visit that something was going to happen. I was like, we're going to come back to this place. Like there was this feeling of we're going to come back to this place. Little did I know we would come back and be there for a long extended period of time. So not the first couple of times we went to visit, but at one point my mom dropped us off, me and my brother and my sister, who were 3 and 2 at the time. And she left us there. She left us there. And there wasn't much supervision because the family member, she was a drug addict. So she wasn't hardly at home. She had 2 teenage daughters who, of course, at that age, and given the lifestyle that they were living, they weren't there at all either. So I was at 5 years old left to not only babysit my 2 siblings, but become almost like an adult. So just making sure we had things to eat. That resulted in me stealing food, looking out for us, making sure that we stayed out of trouble, things like that. So I became an adult at the tender age of 5. That's pretty much where my story starts.
For how long were you there kind of fending for yourself with your siblings?
I want to say it was 2 months because I remember it being over the summer period. We weren't in school. And so I think it was a summer thing. So I'm thinking anywhere from 2 to 3 months we were there, but it was a long time. It definitely feels longer than 2 months.
Right, right. Did you have any explanation from her at all, or was it just you're staying with
No,
these people and
no, we didn't have a talk about it. She didn't say anything. She would come back every now and then. I do remember on one occasion she came back and she came to bring us food. We were on welfare at the time, so she was getting, government assistance. So she brought us food. And as soon as she left, they took all of the food out, and I guess they were going to sell it, but they took it all out. I remember standing there watching them and going, I was so happy because it was like we would have something to eat, but they took it all out. All of what she bought, they took it out. I don't know what they did with it, but my thought was like, they're going to sell it. They're going to sell all this food. Yeah.
this is 5 years old. So this goes on for, like you said, 2 months. Does she then come and get you?
No, she doesn't. Well, she does come and get us, but my non-biological grandmother, she took in my mother when my mother was about 2 years old. And so she was a part of my mother's life, our lives growing up. She was the one that, not knowing her way around the area, she first found my mom and then had my mom bring her to us. There's no telling how long we would have been there had she not have come to get us.
So then you go and live with her. Is that correct?
Yes, we go and live with her, which didn't really make things much better because she was very abusive, physically abusive, emotionally abusive. It was the opposite end of the spectrum. We couldn't do anything. We couldn't say anything. We didn't have opinions. We didn't have thoughts or feelings. It was like being in prison, even though I don't know what prison is like, but it definitely felt like a place where we couldn't be children. I had a lot of responsibility. I was still watching my siblings by myself. She still left me with my siblings when she would go to work, things like that. That abuse continued on until I hit like 12. But before I get to that part, I do want to mention also had to encounter some sexual abuse as well. I was molested at the ages of 4, 5, and 6. So before my mom was dating the drug dealer she was with, my brother's father, and he was molesting me and my sister in the home. And then at 5, that was when I was 4. And then when I hit 5, while we were, living out on the streets where my mom had left us, there was a man there that was molesting me and my sister. And then one of the teenage daughters was molesting me. We went to live with my grandmother when I was 6. She came and got us right before I turned 6. And there was a teenage boy next door that was molesting me.
Oh, Tynitria. Wow.
Yeah.
I just think of the age of 5 and 6. I mean,
Yeah.
Okay. So you go to her, you're age 6 at this point.
Yes.
You mentioned through the age of 12. Was that a turning point with her?
CPS got involved. I was about 9.
Okay.
And she had did something severely bad to my middle sister. And there were bruises on her face, visible bruises. And so we were questioned at the school about the bruises, which I was so terrified of her. I didn't say anything. I wasn't going to give them any information. That turned into them having to come to the home and, monitor things as they do. We went to therapy at that point. Therapy started for me then at the age of 9. I was the only one doing the talking. My other 2 siblings didn't say anything. My brother and sister didn't say anything. I was the one expressing how I felt about the abuse and the way that she talked to us and the things that were happening. It was a place where I felt safe. I was definitely terrified of her, but it was a place where I felt safe enough to tell them, the things that was occurring for us at that age.
And that's so brave. That age especially. It feels
Right?
like, yeah. And you took the leadership role in the family at a very, very young age.
Yes, absolutely. I did. I made the mention of 12 because that's when my mom came back to get us. I remember that day because my grandmother had just hit me in the corner of my eye with a Ziploc box. So when my mother came, I just felt like it was, I mean, I was hitting my preteen, so I wanted more freedom, more independence. Definitely was going to get that under my grandmother. And so I did. I cried that day because I wanted to go live with my mom. Given that I knew it wasn't going to be the most stable environment, I still really wanted to go.
Well, and was your mom working on sobriety at all, or was she kind of in and out?
No, she was in and out. I think that that was probably right before she hit the peak of it getting really bad because 12 is around the age when I came in. And so she probably could have hit the peak right then, where things that did occur was a result of the abuse, the alcoholic abuse. So when we went to live with her, it was me and my middle sister. And at that time, my youngest sister was 2. So it was the 4 of us together. And there were occasions where my 10-year-old sister would ride with my mom because she was drinking. It got really heavy around that time. And I think because she was experiencing so much abuse, because that was a thing for her throughout her entire life, pretty much, it just made matters worse. So at 12, I know she tried to commit suicide and she was intoxicated, very much so intoxicated. She had taken a full bottle of pills, and I remember that moment as well, walking in the room and, her eyes rolling in the back of her head, and her head was tilted back. It was scary. It was a hard experience. We got detail of what happened with her, but she did. She tried to kill herself. And that was just one of many episodes that occurred throughout the years, as a teenager with her in the alcoholic abuse. It just seemed to get worse from there.
So this is preteen. Are you there through high school?
Yes, I am. Yeah, we moved around quite a bit. We were always in a new place. I don't know if that was her idea of starting over or starting fresh. She would refurnish the house. Like it was like, creating a brand new start. When I hit 14, she was gone more often and she would just be out drinking. I do remember a time where I had to, bail her out of jail. She had gotten a wreck for a DWI. Wasn't a real bad one, but bad enough for, her to end up in jail. So, and I remember staying up pretty much 24 hours, literally 24 hours, trying to find someone who was able to take me to get her out of jail. She had gotten to a place to where I was holding her money. So I was like her bank account, her savings account. And so we had the money. I knew all of her personal information. And so I just needed to find an adult who would take me.
So is she holding down a job at this point?
My mother was never really good at holding down a job. I think that's why she kept, when we consider a side hustle, there was always something that she was involved in that was either drugs or stealing, something to that extent to supplement her income, or when she didn't have income, or she was, quote unquote, hustling other men. So just being with them or around them to get money from them.
When you tell me your age and these different things happening, it's like you were like such a grown up at such an early age that by the age of, I would say 15, 16, you must have had the wisdom, at least, that comes with that continued experience that you were obviously learning from. But you're also a preteen. So I get that, it's not like cognitively you may not understand everything that's going on at that point, but you were probably wise beyond your years.
Right.
Did you ever have any moments or recollections of like sussing out what was going on?
I actually didn't until, well, I guess I could say it was around that age when I started to hear other teenagers my age talk about when they were talking about how they were growing up, like there was a present mother and or father, and they weren't working jobs to pay bills, things like that I was doing. And, we were comparing our lifestyles. That's when I started to really look at it like, okay, this is what I'm going through. It's not normal. But up until that point, I thought everything that I was experiencing or close to everyone else was too. That's when it started to, sink in. Like, I don't have a life that's like the rest of the teenagers or the ones that I was talking to anyway. They were going through common problems like, oh, my mom and dad got a divorce, like things like that that are still, impacting, but not to the extent that of what I was experiencing. Even saying it to you now, and hearing it back, I'm like, wow, there was no sense of normalcy.
Right. And even normalcy being one word, but also consistency.
Right.
Okay, so you get through high school, then what next?
So by the time I hit, and this was still around 14, I started getting to a place to where I decided I was no longer going to listen to the things that my mom was saying. So I started to rebel enough against the things that she was still trying to teach me as a mother. I just made up in my mind that there was nothing that she could teach me. So that continued on into 15, 16, and it got worse because it got to a point to where we started to fight. In line with that came disrespect, doing things without asking, things like that, because I felt like the guidance that I was receiving wasn't enough to help me learn through some of the things that I was experiencing as a teenager, like dating, trying to find a job. And I did pick up work, and I instilled in myself to be consistent in school, in the work. If I started something, my mindset was, I'm going to finish it. I'm not going to be like my mom. If I date somebody, if they abuse me, I'm going to leave them. Like, I started making rules based on, what I was seeing my mom encounter throughout the years. But that started to break any relationship that she and I could have had. Then I started being promiscuous. Anything to make me feel better. So I think that it became a heavy sense of being self-absorbed because I didn't want to experience any more pain outside of what I was dealing with at home. So I started expecting people to make me happy, the things that I was doing to make me happy, because all I wanted at that point was just to be happy. Even at the age of 16, I'm like, saying it now, it sounds like such a simple thing. I just want to be happy. It sounds so basic and simple, but it was so heavy for me. Yeah, I think that I made choices from there. So 17, 18, I graduated, paid for all my high school expenses, paid for all my sisters and brothers' expenses. And then I started doing what was my side hustle because I started doing hair at 15.
Nice.
Yeah, so I started to once I hit 18 after I graduated, I started trying to look into like schooling, things that I didn't know about. I started looking into how I could build a steady flow of income, but basically the right way, something prominent. I did go to school for cosmetology, got my license. I made everything happen for myself.
You sound like a force, Tynitria. You sound like a force. Like
Yeah.
you were determined. And still, once again, when you think of your age,
Mm-hmm.
you know what I mean? Like if we look back on this is you're a teenager.
Yes.
And you're making these decisions. Like that's just, it blows my mind. Okay, so you go back to school, you get your cosmetology license. What next?
I got pregnant. I went to, after cosmetology school, I spent a little time trying to build that up, again, not knowing how to go about that. I was afraid to make that step outside of committing to something deeper, like in a sense of, oh, if you're going to be a cosmetologist, you have to get out here and get a booth and pay booth rent. Things like that that scared me about life because I didn't know what would happen. My childhood developed in me a fear of the unknown. So if I didn't know it, if it wasn't a clear-cut plan, I was scared to do it. So I went to acting school, trying to, again, do something that I could build a career in, that I had an interest in. I met my boy's father in acting school by the time I was 21, before finishing, I was pregnant.
What was that like in terms of, was it a circumstance that you were happy with? Were you excited about it? Like, what was your reaction to it?
I was not happy at all. I actually fell into a depression. I fell into a depression, a suicidal depression. It was difficult to battle those thoughts of suicide every day. Like, I would just be driving, and my thought would be, I could just drive right off this cliff and, just end it. That would be it. I couldn't grasp the idea after all of what I had been through and pretty much raising my siblings. I couldn't grasp the idea of being a good mother to a child I didn't know enough about myself, let alone knowing enough about being a mother. And I just kept thinking to myself, like, I can't carry a child 18 years. Like, I can't raise a child. There was no belief in me. There was a heavy amount of doubt. And so that depression was probably like one of the hardest things, aside from the other things I've been through, that I went through where I was aware of it. I just had so much pent up aggression and anger that at that point it was a lot of lashing out at the people around me, the people that I loved, that cared about me.
Did you get some support outside of that?
I can say my boy's dad, he was very optimistic. I think that helped a great deal because he remained optimistic through the entirety of my depression. What made me come out of it was a conversation that my mom had with me. She came in my room. At one point, I was laying down and she just started talking about my choices in what I could do, what we believed in as far as having children or bringing children into the world. She gave me an opportunity to really look at my situation and make a choice. It was the first time I felt like she was just my mother. Like I wasn't mothering her. She wasn't asking me advice on how to be a mother. She came in and, it's making me emotional now because it has always and still a big thing for me to have her as my mother because of the things that occurred in our lives. And so it was a moment that she was 100% my mom. She was there to nurture and understand and, help me through the space. She knew I was struggling. And it did. It brought me to tears. Even thinking about it, I'm like, I remember laying down on my back and the tears rolling down the side of my eyes, just kind of feeling like she was breaking through my spirit.
She kind of rose to that occasion, right?
Yeah, she did.
When you needed her most.
She did.
So did that give you a little bit of a different perspective moving forward on it? I know you have a son, so I know that the decision was to move forward and all of that.
I feel like I tapped into my survival instincts. I made my bed, I have to lay in it type thing. So it was kind of like, pick up your big girl pants, put them on, and you have to move forward. You're going to have a baby. You're going to have to be in this for 18 years. So let's do what we need to do. There was no healthy regard for it. It was just what I knew in survival. I do what I've always been doing.
Okay, so fast forwarding a little bit, your first child's father, were you with him for several years?
Yes, 7.5 years we were together.
Okay.
Our relationship dynamic for me was he was a mirror. He was a mirror of how I was behaving in my life towards others. So the things that I was doing to other people, because I know I was emotionally and mentally abusive towards my family and other people just because of my selfishness. He was a mirror image of that. So, not saying that everything that he did was a part of his personality, but he was the one to show me this is how you're treating other people. So, it was kind of like you have to treat people the way you want to be treated, and this is the way that you're treating people. Once I started to feel that, that was the breaking point for me to begin changing. I was like, I don't like the way that this feels. I didn't know I was making people feel this way. I have to change. Granted, I had the idea of change at 14, but that was different. I didn't know how to change at 14. By that age, I was like, oh, I have to figure out something. Something has to change. And I don't know if this was a defense mechanism or not, but I started to dial back on how I was approaching people, how I would talk to people, just being a little more conscious of how I was. I still had some of my old behavioral patterns, but I was a little bit more aware of, okay, you said it like this, or you're saying this, and this is wrong. I still refuse to apologize. That was a heavy part of me. Couldn't hold accountability to causing pain to others.
Right. Well, and your experience of it too is
exactly
around people that necessarily took accountability for your pain either. So,
right.
How do you learn that, right?
Exactly. And so probably about 4 to 4.5 years into that relationship, I cheated on him. I always reflect back on it and remember feeling like something was missing. I don't know what it was, but something emotionally was missing from our relationship dynamics or, just what we were doing with each other in our relationship. And I didn't know how to address it, but it was missing for me and it was evident, like I could feel it. And, at some point I got what the perceived fulfillment from someone that I was talking to. And then it started to manifest or evolve into, okay, I need to escape where I'm at. Like, this is not working. I need to get out of this situation that I'm in.
With your partner, you mean?
Yes, with my boy's dad. Yeah. Right before that, I was working, the only one working. I was working a massive amount of overtime to try to, stabilize our home. We had two children by then, two small children by then. And so he was trying to finish out school and I was trying to support him. And so after cheating, that was a short time frame. It was like 2 months. I spent 2 months with the other person. And then I went back to my boy's dad. And over the course of us trying to repair that relationship, he started to be abusive. I looked at it as him lashing out. And that was one of the points where I always reference it as I broke one of my rules because I set that rule. And I mentioned that earlier, that watching my mom getting abused, I wouldn't allow somebody to do that to me. And so I allowed it. And that's more so why I speak to it in that regard, because I felt like I needed to be punished for what I did. I felt like that would be the only way to make it right. After that, he got to a point himself where he was like, we need to go to therapy. I didn't want to go to therapy. Again, I didn't want to hold myself fully accountable for someone else's pain. Cheating definitely made me realize that I needed to do something different in that regard, holding myself accountable to the choices I was making, the way I was impacting people, especially because now my children were involved.
Right. Yeah.
His mother actually was the one who had a conversation with me. And it probably was that motherly advice that you get, that motherly understanding. She was the one that said that we should go to therapy. And that conversation with her is what made me be like, okay, I'll do it.
Yeah. Now this is like you guys had been together for what, 5 years at this point? 4 or 5 years?
Yes. We were together about 4 or 5 years at this point. Mm-hmm.
So how did that go?
For me, I feel like therapy was the best decision. I got in there, and once I was able to start talking and like revealing things and releasing them, I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. I did still have the remorse and a lot of guilt. I already had shame just because of, the things that I experienced in life, but it was like, oh my God, I have a voice. I'm able to speak. I started to really, develop into understanding who I was as a person, how I was being impacted without needing to go to people and, point blame, because that's what I was doing at first, pointing all of the mistakes I was making and how I was feeling on the people who hurt me. And so once I started to take accountability for my actions, for my mistakes, for my feelings, that for me changed everything. Because then it was like, I have the power to make a difference in my life. I don't have to rely on the individuals whom impacted me to change what they did or apologize for what they did or make me feel better. I can do it.
I love that, just how you say it, because it's almost like in the story that you've told so far, it feels like you've had agency all of your life to some degree or another, of like, this is kind of my thing. I'm taking care of my siblings. All right, I'm going to handle the situation. Now I'm taking care. So you were always the caregiver.
Yes.
And now it's like you're given an opportunity to speak your truth and let go of secrets and all of the things that obviously the dysfunction of families of all different types have, right? Where you're able to release a lot. It sounds like you really opened yourself up then to change just in terms of how you were going to show up in life.
Exactly.
Oh my gosh, Tynitria. So, all right. So then what happens after this? So you go to therapy. You are in love with therapy.
We put our oldest son in therapy as well, because even at 3, he was identifying a bit of what was going on. So kind of how I was at the age of 2, he was picking things up, asking questions, things like that. So we did put him in therapy and later did put the younger one in therapy as well. He was only 1 at first. So we waited till he got just a tad bit older. And then sometime into therapy, probably a year or 2 into therapy, I realized that I needed spiritual healing. I felt like I needed all the healing at that point. Like the therapeutic healing. Like now I need some spiritual healing. That led me to God. I gave my life to Christ and just wanted to come more into a space of allowing self to have a way of healing that wasn't contingent upon my circumstances. So, when you make that connection to, something spiritual, that is you giving that away so that something can come in and restore you, so to speak. After we split, me and the boys continued therapy. Therapy for me and the boys, by this time they were about 5 and 7, really changed how I parent because I had only knew the authoritative, abusive sense of my grandmother and then the totally relaxed parenting style from my mother. And so I needed to find a middle. There were times I felt like I was starting to be like my grandmother, more on the abusive side. And then there were times where I felt just like my mother, like I don't know what I'm doing as a parent. A lot of that doubt started to seep in. And so therapy helped me find a good middle.
I'm telling you, Tynitria, you impressed me quite. And just in terms of, because you've just done the work.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Now, your sons, how old are your sons now?
They are about to be, they're 13 and 15. They're about to be 14 and 16 in December.
Oh, you got the teen years. That's right. So what made you decide to start working with other people on letting go of, maybe the better way to put this is accepting the past trauma and kind of moving forward in their lives? How did you start that process with other people?
So I met my current husband probably 9 months. Yeah, it was 9 months after I had separated from my boy's dad. Once we started dating, what I feel like he brought to our relationship was just restoring to me that dependency, having someone I could depend on that was willing to go to an extent that I definitely wasn't accustomed to. And so it was a fight, definitely a fight with me being the person who was the one that everyone depended on. And so it was a lot that had to shift within the dynamics of our relationship. After I got better about letting that go, letting that guard down, allowing him to come in and take care of some things, I started having time to look at, and he aided in pointing out things in me that was occurring from my childhood, like that it stemmed from my childhood. He's a very curious individual, so he would just ask questions that I obviously wasn't thinking about that made me start to really think about, okay, how am I thinking? How am I being? What am I doing? Some areas where I was still very aggressive because he's a calmer personality. That sense of curiosity building within me, because, you learn from your partner, you learn from each other, is what allowed me to start really taking a deeper look at my own emotions. And also with the help of my oldest son, because he challenged parts of me where I had to learn how to either up level or evolve so that I could teach him how to move through things in his emotions. It started with my health. I was working on my health and just making changes in what I was eating, how I was working out, things like that really took a sense of having to have a little bit more knowledge than as opposed to just doing it. And that brought me to looking into coaching. I looked it up just to see if it was a thing and found an institute. And I waited first. My husband helped me. He was a catalyst. He helped me push past the fear. And once I did call and sign up, after that, things definitely took off from there because coaching pretty much, what we do as coaches is ask individual questions to help them, dive into areas that they're not aware of or looking at or taking time to examine. And so when you go through the program, you're receiving coaching just as much as you're learning to be a coach. And so I learned more about health and then started learning more about life. And I took interest more so in life because obviously of my experiences.
Mm-hmm.
That's what really shifted things for me, being in coaching and then just continuing on out. So I got to a point to eventually where the things that were going on outside and within society, seeing what Black people were encountering, is what made me even more so develop that passion to want to help others. Because and still having that experience myself growing out of and moving past my triggers and letting go of my defense mechanisms and things like that that you learn when you're actually doing the work, having to build that within myself made me build a deeper passion to want to help others do the same. I still have this standing motto of if I can do it, anybody can do it, because I had to comb through and climb through so much trauma and pain. That's where that passion came from, to help others.
I can imagine too, being of service to other people. It's a whole nother level of healing, right? Because you're hearing other people's stories. Like you said, back in high school, you didn't realize that, other families, you felt, aren't they experiencing similar things that I am? And not necessarily the case, but in a lot of households, other people were probably experiencing trauma of their own. And now hearing from other people that have had experiences that you're obviously very relatable to them because you have been through it as well. I feel like there's that whole other sort of layer of effectiveness that you have with people because you've been there and then some.
Yes, absolutely.
I want to ask you this. How is your relationship with your mother now?
So she's definitely closer to sobriety. She's never done, anything as far as recovery, but over the years while I was healing and while I was in therapy, because I did some of that work with her, just coming to her because my therapist was working with me on healing some of the pain and anger I had towards my mother, we're a lot closer. We are a whole lot closer because it was as if as I was doing the healing, she was doing healing of her own as well. I attribute a lot of hers to her relationship with God. And I also feel like because she has such a heavy passion to be a good mother and she's so loving, that it's also a natural thing for her to want to get better. And so she was part of my coaching journey as well. She was like my first practice client because we needed that to get our certification. And the time that I coach her, which it was, over a 2-year time span, and she still, is part of the things that I'm doing now, that really allowed me to get to know her as a human being. Like having to ask her questions and put myself in a position as her coach and not her daughter, but also still relate to her in an understanding way as her daughter. That made me start to really, my eyes start to open up to, okay, she's a human. She's a human with feelings and, she has struggles. There are things that she's been through. It was astonishing to be able to see her as a human being.
Well, and it's kind of that realization that you have when when you get older and you realize like, oh, we're all adults here now. My parents are talking to me as an adult. I'm realizing that they're an adult and I'm going through things that they've gone through in their past.
Right.
But I can also imagine the coaching experience being what it is. And by the way, that's a huge step to take to coach your mom and to put yourself in that role. But with that said, that gives you the opportunity because I would venture to say there's questions that we'd like to ask our parents that maybe under a different circumstance would not be as well received or would not. So I feel like you were probably able to get some truth from her that maybe you weren't able to get or wouldn't have been able to get in another approach. So that's healing as well, obviously.
Yes. And she was in the same way able to get truth from me too. Just not knowing her daughter as well. Not knowing that I went through all of what I went through as the oldest, to them, I looked like I had it all together. She was able to learn a lot about me. I was grateful for that. I can't tell you how much more I felt as her daughter. Like I was able to, we reached a point in the coaching as she came through it where I started to feel like I'm her daughter. those roles started to shift within the work that we were doing. And, now I can go to her and just be her daughter.
Right.
Even some of that showed up, even me being that little girl who didn't receive that, to the mother that she is now. Because, like you said, when you're grown, it's different. The relationship is different because you're older, you're grown. But for her and I, we still got to experience some of that care that is, a natural part of her. I was grateful for that, to have those short stitch of experiences where I felt like, oh, I'm her 5-year-old daughter whom she loves and cares for.
Oh, that is so beautiful. I mean, and to have that
Yes,
opportunity still and have her around, and it sounds like she's super supportive.
she is so much so.
Now, when you work with individuals, are there topics that come up? Are there particular things that you find yourself saying a lot to clients that you work with that might be going through traumatic times or might be overcoming childhood trauma? Like, what would you say to someone who is overcoming childhood trauma? What would be a piece of advice you would give them in terms of next steps if they're kind of saying, what do I do? How, things aren't working for me as an adult. What do I do?
I would say getting help. Do all that you can and the best that you can to get help. Because even after the coaching with my mom, she came into the feeling of, okay, I need therapy. I think that's a great place to be. Of course, I can't do as a coach what a therapist can do. So I went through therapy. And so I was like, I think that's a great next step. I think when you can help clients reach a point to where they're, especially, my culture, I can say any individual that struggles with getting help and, leaning on other people for support, like that's a huge struggle for people. I think that's the biggest win you could have as a coach when someone opens their heart and mind to saying, I need help. And there's less of that resistance to try to do every single thing by themselves, all on their own, like trying to carry all of the burdens. I think that's the biggest thing.
I love how you say that because I think probably people that come to you may not even recognize that in themselves,
Right.
right? That they have this propensity to just take care of things. And if you
Yes.
can say to them and say, hey, I know what that feels like, right? I know what it feels like to feel like I can take care of it. Don't bother helping me. I'm good. I'm good. And for
Yes.
someone to recognize that in themselves helps them to let go of that a little bit. But you have to recognize it first, right?
You do. You do.
What is coming up next for you? So you're working with clients. Are you working just one-on-one with clients?
One-on-one, I do have a group coaching program. So haven't had a
Okay.
full group yet. I've had one. I've had one full group, but just one-on-one mostly. And then I do a lot of free challenges within my group. And then I do events just to give people an opportunity to see what a coaching experience would be like. So I do a lot of in-person events. What's coming up next for me is I just recently looked into partnering with or joining a company called RAIN. It is a organization for sexual abuse. So I'm going to be a speaker for them and start, going out to the youth and just getting my voice heard around my experiences regarding sexual abuse. I think that's a good step for me to take because I'm so transparent, so open about it. I don't mind giving the full details, the full extent. And I really feel like small girls need to hear that. I feel like they need to know that, it's important not to just not say anything. You have to speak up, find somebody that you trust to speak up. So that's what's coming up next for me. I'm really excited about that.
That is exciting. And I'm excited too. I'm excited for your audience because it sounds like you're going to have the ability to reach more and more people. And that's kind of that's the beauty of speaking and getting your voice heard. And
Hmm.
that's a big part of it, I would imagine. I mean, trauma definitely causes that inability to find our voices sometimes. For you to be able to get people into a space where they feel like, well, she can do it, so can I, is amazing.
Hmm.
Now, we're going to share all of Tynitria's links in the show notes too. But Tynitria, I can't even tell you, I'm moved by your story, but I'm also in awe of your courage and your strength and just your growth. I mean, you are a rocket and I love it. And I want to stay in touch with you because I want to hear more and more about how you're getting out there in the community because, you can do nothing but help more and more people, which is amazing. So thank you so, so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. Thank you so, so much. I enjoyed it.
Okay, that's it for now. Until next time. Thanks for listening to the Journeys Through Change podcast. You can find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or really wherever you get your podcasts. And be sure to follow us and leave a review if you've enjoyed this episode. And share it with a friend or on social media to spread the good word, so more women like you can find us and join in on the fun. For more information on the podcast or Day by Day book, go to livedaybyday.com.